Hi, I'm Micheal Killen, and I think we all know something, that Silicon Valley is one of the great growth areas on the planet today. And I've been fortunate to live here for about 40 or 50 years, and I have been able to observe the work of many political leaders that are trying to do good things for us. And I have been able to identify two men who I find remarkable, who work extremely hard to help the community. I've invited them to come on this show, and I want to ask them about a few things they have learned that can help other political leaders in other communities. First, it's Burt. And Pat, I think, has been a mayor at least once, maybe several times, and he's almost always been a council member of that great city of Palo Alto. So Pat, I'm glad you're here. And my other guest is Bill Widmer. And Bill is right now a vice president of the important city, Atherton, but he has also been the mayor of that city. And I think, well, I do know he's also on the board of an organization called the South Bay Waste Management Authority, which I think has 8 different cities. These are two men who have impressed me by their devotion to service. So I'd like to start with asking Bill Widmer a couple of questions.
Sure.
First, how are you today?
I'm okay. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I would like you to share maybe 3 of what you consider to be the most important accomplishments or things you have done for the people of Atherton. And maybe you could give them to me as bullets. If you give them
Sure.
to me as bullets, I try to remember them, and I might come back and ask follow-on questions.
Okay. Sure, no problem. First off, when I was first vice mayor and mayor, the year I was mayor, we ended 8 years of deficit spending, and we have not gone back into deficit spending since then. So we restructured our town operations. We brought a new way of applying fringe benefits with the cafeteria plans that are used in public companies. So we kind of changed our operational mode, and I think that that's paid a lot of dividends. Secondly, we've improved the safety. So when I was mayor, we had a major accident where we had some deaths on El Camino with pedestrians crossing, and I personally got involved in talking to the director of Caltrans and worked hard enough to get him to agree to put these hawk beacons, these pedestrian crossing beacons, on there. It took some time to actually get them implemented, but it all started with those accidents and my calling him and writing him letters and copying the press on that. So I had to really get that thing going. Now, you mentioned the South Bay Waste Management Authority. So during my time as a council member and also as a board member, we've increased our diversion. So diversion is when we throw something away, does it go into the landfill or is it repurposed? And our diversion is now up to 84%. So only 16% of what gets thrown out from Atherton homes actually goes into the ground. And that, of course, helps the environment. And it's a great thing for us to be doing. And we're one of the leaders in the country doing 84%, and we're trying to get up to 90%. And hopefully one day we'll all be at 0 emissions.
So when you were mayor, and that was for a few years, several years, and also a council person, I guess, you helped drive fiscal responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I think I've read something where you constantly ask the question, is this needed, or is it, we just want to have it?
Well, you're right. When you're doing anything, including we're right now in the process of designing a new civic center and a new library, there's must-have and there's nice-to-haves, and you need to ferret those out. And if you have the funding available and you think it's actually going to have a payback in the future, such as sustainability, some sustainability aspects, for sure we need to do that. But we do need to pay attention to the bottom line. In the case of this new Civic Center, what we don't want to do is we don't want to mortgage our future and not be able to then maintain our infrastructure by spending money now on things that are nice to have, but we want to do the smart things.
Now, we all have little phrases and ideas that stay in our minds. I probably, also think, is this needed for me to do, or nice? Where did the thought of that balance, that phrase, where did that first come to you? From your parents, from school?
No, it was when I was working with, I worked for General Dynamics for 15 years, and we always had to look at things as, what our return was going to be, and do you really need to add this to a project or not? And so we always went through those checklists.
Okay, and you talked about you were instrumental. I mean, you walked the extra mile to get Caltran to go do something to improve the safety of people traveling through your city or crossing over the river, whatever. And I do want to say, on a couple occasions, we talked about the high-speed train. And one of the things you said to me is safety. You have a train that's going to intersect with people and roads, and that is a prescription for a disaster at times. And so I remember you were again bringing up the safety issue, which I think is very good. But somebody told me something about the third point you made, and it was not you. This thing called the South Bay Waste Management Authority. Somebody told me you were a driving force in putting it together in the first place.
Well, I can't say I was a driving force with putting it together. The Joint Powers Association has been there for probably 20 years, but getting electeds on the board so that we're more responsive versus just having staff members on the board was one thing. And then I became chairman of the operation. I helped keep the costs down, but also drive some major programs. So it's been a good few years that I've been there.
Okay, so you have a lot of accomplishments, and I have to admire all of them that I know about. But you're now thinking about running again, this time to be a council person?
Well, we elect a mayor and a vice mayor annually. Currently, I'm vice mayor, and I may go back to being a council member or whatever. But yeah, this is my third term. If I rerun, it would be my third term, and I think that it would be my last term.
Okay. And if you're reelected, can you tell me two things that you're going to do for the voters and the people who don't vote?
Well, I'm going to hit you with three because
All right.
I think the third one's very important. As you know, we have a dilapidated library and town center, and we need to build a new one. So we need to get that properly sized and properly facilitized so that we can afford it and get those things built. And we need to actually get that moving and get that done in the next couple of years. So that's one key thing. I think another key thing is working with the schools and the fire district to make sure that our streets and our kids are safe. And lastly, I think a very major thing is, and you'd be able to also mention that, Pat, but what one community doesn't just affect that community, it affects other communities. Yeah. And many of the communities just work in a vacuum. And what they need to do is we need to have some more regional communication. We need to have council meetings, joint council meetings with other jurisdictions so we can talk about the changes we want to get. And we can address the traffic issues and the school issues and things like that at that time. And today, that really doesn't happen. I'm not talking about setting up a joint powers and a taxing authority. I'm just talking about just getting together, talking about the regional issues, because traffic and noise and construction, all those things are regional issues.
Sure. All right, let me see if I got it straight. One of your priorities, how you're going to help your community, is make sure they get a good library and not spend a lot of money where they don't have to. You're very concerned about the safety of children, and you're working with the fire department, the police, and others to improve the safety of the children going and coming from school and then after school. And the third thing you're planning to do, you recognize that Palo Alto doesn't talk to Atherton that much, or to Menlo Park or Redwood City or any of the other communities. And in your next term, you want to work to see Pat more often and other members and help everybody see the larger picture of this community and to work together, learn from each other. That's it.
And understand what's going on down the stream, what their strategy is, and be able to provide input into theirs. They would provide input into ours.
All right.
That's great.
So for the viewers who might not know you, but I think you're well known, Bill Widmer, and you'll be running for, maybe for, it's a councilman?
Yeah, it's a council position, yes.
All right, thank you. And my other guest over here is Pat Burt. And I have ideas as to what I think are some of the more important things you have done for the city of Palo Alto, but I'm not ready to say. What is the most important 1, 2, or 3 you feel you have done for the city of Palo Alto?
Well, when I reflect on things that I was most involved with that matter to me, I kind of have 3 buckets. Ones that are more personal and emotional touchstones. They may be smaller things, but they matter a lot. Ones that are kind of the blocking and tackling of city government working well. Things like what Bill was talking about on sustainable finances. And the third is some kind of bigger, more impactful measures that we did as a city and have been leveraged and had impact beyond Palo Alto. So on kind of the touchstones, we had a couple of great projects. One of called Ada's Cafe that employs mentally disabled adults in a wonderful cafe at our new library. Another is a magical bridge playground that was one of the first playgrounds that was fully accessible to people with all disabilities, children and their parents and their grandparents, and has been a great success and now is being replicated. In the blocking and tackling, we also had to address both pension reform and improved efficiency in our government so that, frankly, we could have not only sustainable finances going forward, but in addition, be able to afford to reinvest in infrastructure in ways that we hadn't done adequately. And so we've accomplished those things largely. And then I was also very involved in a joint power authority to finally get flood protection on an important stream that has had major flooding over the decades in Palo Alto. Then the big stuff is more pertaining to topics that you're involved with, our sustainability and climate action plan and the elements of that, of being one of the first cities to have 100% carbon-free electricity and to be moving forward to a sustainable water supply and other elements of that plan. And then a lot of things in what are called smart city movement, which is using 21st century communications and data technology to improve the lives of residents and for future generations.
I think I could write a book on a lot of those things. I have seen some of the things that you worked on help move forward, but the one that, I only have a certain vision, a window that I see things. The one I have really noticed is that you believe in the principle of leadership, taking the lead, helping the city take the lead, and not just for the sake of your community benefiting from it, but so that other cities, communities worldwide could look at Palo Alto and see the good, and then for them to decide if they want to do the same. And you touched on some of that where you talked about clean energy resources and sustainability. I think you have helped Palo Alto be seen as a beacon on the hill for doing its best for everything to be sustainable, including the environment that we live in. Am I correct?
Yeah, you know, going back to the Kyoto climate conference, one of the reasons that the U.S. didn't really adopt those protocols was because there was an argument that we have a renewal of today with our current administration that you can't have essentially clean renewable energy, cheap energy, and a strong economy. We have 100% carbon-free electricity. We have it at 1/3 less the cost than most of the rest of the state of California. And we have an economy that if there's a problem with our economy, it's that it's too strong and too affluent, and that we have the disruptions that occur for social and economic equity from that. But certainly it's an economy that a lot of cities would like to have. And so we feel like we've disproven that false claim that you really can't have, these things are somehow mutually exclusive.
I may have missed something. Is it that you can't have some of these benefits because, oh, you can have it because you have the money? Is that it?
Well, it's that the claim was that if we had 100% clean energy, it would be too expensive. And so the trade-off would be too high a rates for residents and businesses, and that that would cause the economy to not be strong enough, and so that you couldn't have these three things all at once.
Okay, so that reminds me, I was looking at some tweets. Somebody, man in the foothills of the Sierras is sending me these tweets now, and he claims the state of California has spent a fortune on its California climate plan, and the state is now almost bankrupt, and he's arguing we have to get rid of that plan because it's hurting the economy, and the plan is clean energy and a few other things. And so anyway, what you said made me think of that, and you've been able to help provide your community with clean energy and at the same time lower the rates. So that is something I think every community would like to do. And so I'd like to go back to Bill. Bill, from all of your experience, what do you think is the most important recommendation you could give us for leaders of other communities?
Sure. Well, I think the thing I just mentioned at the end was working on regional problems. I think that's a big stepping stone that we all need to go through. Secondly, our public process, rightfully so, says we're going to do the business of the people in the sunshine. And when you do that, then you come together and you have a series of issues as a council member, and one council member may have a really good idea, or even two of them, but they only have a few minutes to talk about that agenda. And if it's not exactly what staff recommended, they may not have the time to get their point across and see if it made sense with their colleagues. And so another comment I would make to anybody either that is in government today or is thinking about government, once you're there, don't gavel things along. A lot of times the chairman of the meeting will say, okay, fine, we're going to take a vote now. And people haven't had an adequate time. And thirdly, since you've asked for three, is you've got to remember two things, is that, that you've got to keep the taxpayer in mind, and you've got to understand that, he is looking for the services. And when you're having a services operation, and my background has been in services in the private industry, you know, you've got to have metrics, you've got to track those metrics, you've got to get customer feedback, you know, and you've also got to flow information down on how you're doing and make sure that you're taking corrective action and having continuous improvement. So keep an eye on who your customer is and make sure that they're getting good value for their money, but work well as a region and make sure that you're properly vetting things and you hear all the ideas before making a decision.
Now, I think you don't get any money.
No, we don't get paid to be on a council.
And so where did this notion come from in you that you'll work for nothing and provide the best service you can to your community? Where did that come from?
Well, Michael, I was a Boy Scout, I was an Eagle Scout, and you know, service has always been in my blood. You know, in my private life, I'm also a member of the Order of Malta, and our charter is there's defense of the religion, but the key thing is service to the sick and poor. And you know, on days like today, in the mornings, I go up to St. Anthony's up in Redwood City, and I work up there in the kitchen. You know, we try and take care of our brother, and I think that yeah, I've always done service.
Admirable, and I hope you decide to run again, and I would assume if you did, you will get elected again.
Thanks, Mike.
And I was wondering, Pat, what one or two pieces of advice from all your experience and accomplishments do you have to share with other political leaders of other communities?
Well, I guess one of the things would be something that Bill touched on, which is that local government provides actually a real opportunity for grassroots democracy. Now, it's still representative democracy, but we're at the level that's most in touch with the citizenry, and we can go about that in two directions. One is where we still are as elected officials thinking that we possess all of the insights and the authority to make all the decisions. The other is to really embrace the intellectual capital of our communities. And I think that the latter is both one that fulfills our American ideals more completely, but it's also done correctly. It can be the most effective because the answers to many of our problems, both in terms of building consensus and creative ideas and problem solving, rests in really engaging the community. Okay. And then the implementation, we need the community.
So you're saying to other political leaders, don't assume you have all the answers. You have talent in your community and other communities. Reach out, add their insights, their good ideas to your own, and then you can be more effective.
And the implementation part, and I'll give you an example. We have, you know, we're here in earthquake country and we have floods as well. And we only have a limited number of public safety employees and police and fire on staff at any given time. If we have a big quake or a big flood, there's no way that they can really respond to the need. So we have built up nearly an army of volunteers in the community who are well trained.
That's good. So you're forming a partnership with the people and no doubt with other communities. A partnership, you form them where you need to be strong. All right, I hope you run again when the time is up. And I was wondering if at this point, we have about 4 minutes left, if the team would be kind to let me show a few of the paintings. I am a member of this community and I make my art to assist the community. So if you're ready, folks, would you start showing some paintings? I'll try to say the names of them and the sizes, but and then give me a little signal when it's time for us to have a commercial. Okay, this painting is related to California's goal number 5, which is reduce the emissions of short-lived gases like methane Okay, and this is methane joins carbon to boil the planet. Can we have another one? By the way, one has to have a bit of a few screws loose to be able to conjure up these things, and I don't really make them difficult to understand, but I do recognize the value if somebody else is looking at something and they have to use their brain. Their brain grows to understand it. All right, this is part of a painting that I call one of, well, I call it California's most important climate goal, and that is to safeguard California. It's 20 feet by 6. Can we see another one? And this is a painting, it's 15 feet by 6 foot. It is inspired, my attempt to bring attention to California's climate plan goal number 2, which is to reduce 50% of the petroleum in the vehicles by 2030. Do we have another one? It's coming. Okay, this is a painting I made in my very earliest part of my career, and I don't think I've made a better one at all. It's called The Beginning After the End of Civilization, and I made it because I could see that greenhouse gases is a development that can end our civilization, and that painting tries to bring it to attention that it can happen even though we haven't seen it happen. Things happen that have never happened before to us, and that we should be wise and do our best to work with the state of California and other organizations, Atherton, Midpen, to try to reduce emissions.
I have a small poster of that last one in my office.
Oh, thank you.
So let me ask you, what do you think is really the role of art in various forms in these great issues of our day of climate change and sustainability?
All right. I'm going to answer as they shut the show off. Aristotle told us there's only 3 ways to persuade people: appeal to their logic, their need for positive associations, and the last one there is emotions. I think art can help appeal to people's emotions and help persuade them to think a little differently. And the art can cause discussions. And when people have their discussions, they can grow.
It's also for communication.
For communication. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Micheal Killen. My guest has been Bill Widmer and Pat Burt. And I want to say thank you very much. So,